Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to those that participated in Part A, or welcome back to you guys. For those of you who did not participate in Part A, thank you for joining us for Part 2, A Practitioner's Guide to Meeting Energy Star 3.0 Thermal Enclosure System Rater Checklist, or what we're calling Part B. My name is Shantaria Charleston, HAC's RCDI Program and Training Manager. I will be the host for today's call. So I see just a couple of familiar names out on the board today. But for those of you that are not familiar with the Housing Assistance Council, HAC is a national nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. that assists local organizations with building affordable homes in rural America. With the mission to improve housing conditions for the rural poor, HAC places an emphasis on striving to serve the poorest of the poor in the most rural places. HAC emphasizes local solutions, empowerment of the poor, reduced dependency, and self-help strategies. HAC assists with the development of both single and multifamily homes and promotes homeownership for working low-income rural families through a self-help sweat equity construction method. So if you're interested in learning more about HAC's services or products, HAC has an office near you. If you have any questions or require assistance, please contact your nearest HAC regional offices. Those addresses and phone numbers are being displayed on the screen. I'll give you guys a couple of moments to maybe jot down some numbers, but please be advised that that information will be included as part of the handouts for the webinar. Also, please mark your calendar and join us for the following trainings. We have some webinars coming up, additional webinars on HVAC system quality installation checklist, Part A and Part B. We also have training coming up on low-income housing tax credits, a brief introduction, as well as management and compliance. We also have VA access to health and homeless services coming up in May. We have a place-based symposium taking place in Washington, D.C. on May 20th, so please visit the HAC website for additional information on those trainings. So now I'd like to welcome and introduce today's speaker, Jean Gonzalez. Jean is the Regional Director of HAC Southwest Regional Office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jean has been working in rural affordable housing for over 30 years. Over the course of his career, he's gained expertise in property management, green housing rehabilitation, and affordable housing. Jean's extensive experience includes subdivision development, single-family housing rehabilitation, Section 202 housing, and Sections 514, 516 farm labor projects. For the past 5 years, Jean has provided training and technical assistance in green building, energy conservation, home rating and green habilitation for single and multifamily projects. Jean's knowledge of construction has allowed him to teach groups new smart construction along with passive solar, straw bale, and Adobe. And so at this point, I would like to turn the webinar over to Jean.
All right, thank you, Terry. Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up again or joining us this time. Again, last time we talked about all the different things that took for insulation and the different type of things that we needed to do for most of the beginning. This afternoon, we're just going to talk strictly on air sealing and the things that we had with in regards to what we need to do for complete the thermal list. So again, today we're basically just going to be talking about the Section 5 of the Raters list. It looks something like this. You should have a copy. If not, you might want to get a copy just to become familiar with it. In the end, we'll talk about the end and what some of the requirements that you're going to have to do. But just to start out again, we're just going to be talking about air leakage today, air sealing, some of the things to look for, whether you're the construction supervisor, the homeowner, the installer, whoever you may be. Hopefully you can understand and see some of the items that we're talking about. One of the things that we basically want to talk about, you want to make sure that you're sealing all any penetrations going into the unconditioned space to the conditioned space. and there's going to be several ways of doing this. Some of the bigger culprits in the air leakage is going to be your duct or your flue shaft, plumbing, any kind of piping like that, plumbing systems going through the walls, through the floors. These are going to be some of your big line items. Electrical wiring, bathroom, kitchens, exhaust fans. We'll be talking a little bit about all of these as we go through these. We'll get into your light fixtures, what light fixtures we recommend for in the attic, if they're going to be covered with insulation, if they're going to be open, how to rate those lights, and how to pick one and how to choose those for your unit. Same thing with light tubes and the different kind of lighting that's available up there. So we'll talk about those. And we'll go ahead and just get started on these. First thing we're going to be talking about is we're talking about all your ducts and all your penetrations. As you can see in some of this stuff, you know, one of the things I always tell everybody, even though penetrations and air leakage is number 5 on the checklist, it isn't number 5 that you do in the order of the construction that you're doing. As you're doing your construction, a lot of these air leakage items have to be done as you're still in framing. Most of it should probably already be done before your contractors, before your insulators come in. You know, as soon as your plumber's in, you need to do all this kind of work. So it goes along as you're building it. So you can't wait till everybody else has come in and done their part of the work, because it just won't work that way. So you have to do it as the construction goes along. So from the very beginning, that you can see in this picture on the top left, is they're not framing in to seal that off. That chaseway is just open. Once they frame that in, that chaseway is going to remain open, and that's going to cause a real high temperature drop in that cavity in there. So the next picture, you see how these are framed in, they're sealed off. You want to make sure that all your ducting, all your sealing going into the attic, into the floor, crawl space, any place like that is sealed off. Again, on the right, you can see where all that open is opened. On the right picture on the top right, all those cavities are sealed, all those openings are sealed. In this particular case, they're using foam. Same thing on down here on the bottom. You know, you got the insulations that is still exposed. Remember, insulation is just an insulator. Air still goes through, so you're able to see that. On the right, you got the duct vent where it's seated. It's sealed all the way around. Again, some of this work, a lot of this work is going to have to be done as the installers are putting this stuff in. So again, it all depends on how you're going to see that. The next thing is plumbing. You know, I've always wanted to teach plumbers, if you could teach a plumber to close up holes behind him would be great, you know. But they come in, just look at that first hole. You know, it took him 3 tries before he got it right. So those are all penetrations going into the floor cavity that need to be sealed off. Second picture, they're all sealed off pretty good. Again, you know, the plumber's already going to make a hole that's 3 times bigger than what he actually needs. But getting to go back in there and seal those, that's a big problem. You need to seal those. All these penetrations going in and floor out of the floor definitely need to be sealed. And there's a lot of different ways nowadays. You know, back in the good old days, all you had was a hand caulk gun. That's all you used. Nowadays, they got battery-operated caulk guns guaranteed to give you a 3/8 of an inch bead for 385 continuous feet in under 5 minutes or something like that, you know. So basically, it's turn the caulk gun on and run with it. But, you know, there's different tools out there, great tools nowadays. Again, this is all your plumbing and all your electrical wiring. Again, you know, all those little holes add up. So as an electrician goes through there drilling these holes, you know, somebody needs to follow him and probably seal all the holes right behind him, and just, you know, good geocell. Again, with the geocell, they got great tools nowadays. They got wands. You don't even need to climb the ladder. You got a wand. You can reach, you know, 8-10 feet with that wand and you're done. You don't need to drag a ladder around, nothing like that. Great stuff. And again, a lot of this stuff is done once the framing is in, your electrician is in there, so you're going to try to get all this stuff long before the insulators are coming in. Again, we're going to talk about sealing these exhaust fans. Exhaust fans, you know, you need to make sure that they're sealed to the ceiling. You know, I can show you here. Most of these are sealed exhaust fans or lights. You want to make sure that these are sealed to the inside of the attic. You don't want these opened. This is a sealed box, the first one on the top right. These are all lights that are sealed in the back. And the way you can tell these lights are rated, whether they're rated for to be insulated or covered by insulation, is this IC rated fixture. And basically it talks about recessed lights and how they're insulated and how they act in the attic. And then you got the non-insulated rating type. These things, if you run into these in the attic, basically you have to build a box around them, insulate them, make sure they get enough air and that they're not going to overheat. The ones on the left, these are rated, so you can just stick it up in the attic and get insulation as close as you want to it. It won't affect it. So again, if you're putting these things in the attic, you're putting these recessed lights in, you want to make sure that it's rated. And all these lights will be rated. You'll find the rating on them either on here on the inside or in the back. But you want to make sure that these are covered, that the backing is insulated, and that the temperature isn't going to overheat in the attic if it's covered with insulation. Very important. A lot of people are putting in recessed lights, so just something to make sure that you're seeing in there. And this is all part of the checklist, so as you go down your checklist, if you're doing this, you need to just make sure that you follow up on it. Again, you're sealing all the building envelope. You're trying to seal it as much as possible. We're talking about anywhere that the foundation meets the seal plate, anything like that. And again, you can use anything you want. You can use caulking foam. There's a foam gasket that we'll show you here in just a little bit. You can put the foam gasket in, set in your seal plate, your bottom plate on top of that foam gasket, and that seals that wood against that concrete. And we'll show you those in just a little bit. Again, you just want to seal that envelope. And here, this is a picture that's in the manual, shows you on sealing this seal plate down here to the concrete. You want to seal that in. And again, it talks you can do it various ways. This is one they're just showing a caulking on the inside. This is the one on the left, the top left. You can see that there's no seal in between where the seal plate is sitting on the cinder block. The blue pipe is a blue foam that you can set on top of the concrete before you put in your 2x4. And it seals that off. Again, if you do caulking, you want to make sure that the caulking reaches the seal plate. Again, this one doesn't show it. The foam, the pink foam, that's something that you can spray on, or it's something that you can put on beneath the wood before you put it in place. Again, you can caulk it, seal it, foam it, just about any way you want to do it, as long as it's sealed. Crawl spaces is a good place to get in there. If you can get in there before the floor is laid, just put that in. And then again, continuous air sealing. You know, this is where we're talking about sheetrocking. When you do your drywall on the top plate, you're also going to want to seal all your top plate, all your top blocking up in there. Again, you can use any kind of material, foam, caulking, whatever. Drywall, you can use drywall. When you're doing your drywall, they're wanting you to seal the bottom, and they also want you to seal the top where you're installing it. This gets to be kind of a pain, but you know, once you get it up there and you need to seal it, you might want to do it from the attic if you're not able to do it from the inside. And I'll show you pictures of this in just a little bit. Again, the drywall on the top plate of all the unconditioned attic, and I'll show you this in just a few. Again, this is what they're talking about. Pretend you're up in the attic, you're looking down. All this area right here is where your sheetrock or your drywall is, and that's where they want you to seal that drywall coming into the attic. So you have different options. One is you can caulk it when you're putting your drywall up on the inside, or you can wait till it's up and then get in the attic and seal it. You know, the argument's always been, you know, who's supposed to do this? Is this the sheetrocker's job? Is it the caulker's job? You know. Again, here's an area. This is what it would look like in the attic. Let's say you're doing housing rehab. If you're doing acquisition, rehab, resale, you might get into the attic and you're going to see something like the top left picture there with the unsmiley face. And you're going to see that crack in the attic, you know, and that's where your drywall meets your 2x4, but it doesn't actually meet all the way. So that leaves a big air cavity in there that's bringing it up through that wall. So one way of dealing with all those areas is spraying this foam on it like they did on the second picture there. And you just seal all those areas with foam. Again, on the second set of pictures to the right, again, these are wire penetrations. Also, you got a 2x4 in there, and you got an open cavity in between the 2x4s and the wiring. Again, if you look to the pictures on the right on the bottom, this is one of the dirtiest jobs, I think, and I feel sorry for whoever had to do this, but it looks like they had to go into this attic, move all this insulation aside, and then they're going to come back in here and seal all those spacers and all those 2x4s where those came up. This is why I say when you're doing your framing, you want to avoid anything like this because you don't want to have to come back to do your air leakage work to do this. You know, because this should have already been done when the framing was up, if you would have caught it in the beginning. And one of the things that you need to understand and you need to remember is that the reason you're doing all these penetrations is because when you hook up your blower door, you want a HERS rating of a 65 or better, 60, anywhere down there. You want a good lower number for your HERS rating. So when you're doing your blower door, if you didn't do your homework and you didn't do all this air leakage work, it's going to show on your blower door test. And there's no way of you coming back to do all this air leakage work that should have been done when you were framing after you've already sheetrocked and framed and caulked and you've already ready to go to closing and you do your last blower door test in your short points. So if you don't do your air leakage work, that's where it's going to affect you when it comes to your blower door test. So all these little penetrations, they might not mean much one by one or looking at it, but if you add them all up, they add up. And once that blower door comes in and it starts sucking that air through there and measuring that, it's going to make a big difference whether you do your homework or not. Again, all your rough openings, you know, all your windows, your exterior doors, all those need to be sealed up. Most of the time on these pictures, you'll see where the seal goes. But nowadays, most of these windows will have a wrapping that comes out and they'll wrap to the inside. So you do have to seal that window right in there, and it's usually caulking, foam. You know, I'm a true believer of caulking. I don't like foam. It's kind of messy, but if I got a big gap, I'll use foam. Again, you want to just make sure that all your windows are even, they're well insulated, and they're well sealed. A marriage joint, I hope everybody knows what I mean by a marriage joint. These are like on modulars. If you're getting a lot of modulars, you're doing a lot of mobile homes, double wides. These are usually the 2x4s or the 2x6s that join the floor together right in the bottom here. So that's one way of common walls that we'll see that need to be, marriage joints that need to be sealed. So if you're doing modulars or you're ordering modulars, mobile homes, double wides, you want to make sure that this is sealed in here, right in the middle. Here's a better picture of it. If you're looking underneath, you know, this is where the two joints are. You know, should be a foam gasket in there. Some kind of material should be in between. Again, on the next one on the right, there is none on the first picture, and then you can see it in the back. It's just a black foam that's in between the two joints. Again, most of these, we did different studies on different modulars that were out there. Some of them that were coming out, Energy Star 3.0 already. They're basically 2x6 construction, smart framing. and they come off the racks. They come off at an R30. So all those are insulated well. So okay, again, this is your insulated panels. If you're using SIP panels, if they're, the foam, they have to be taped and sealed to manufacturer's specifications. Again, if you're building these, most of the time you'll see that the SIP panels come together. At every seam, they have to be taped and sealed. And the SIP panels will come with specifications as the type of tape and the overlap that you have to allow for the tape and all the good stuff that you need for installing and sealing those SIP panels up. So it's not just screwing them up and taping them and, and that's pretty much it on the SIP panels. But again, if it's not done right, you're going to have air leakage at each one of those seams. Remember, all you're trying to do now is you're just trying to control the air. As you're doing your caulking and sealing of your unit, sometimes you can bring a blower door test in and you can seal that unit up to where you need it, to where it needs to be, and then you can stop caulking and sealing then, and your unit's good. You don't have to continue to do any more work. Because remember, you want the unit to breathe. You don't want it to make it so tight that you got to bring in fresh air. Then you get into a whole different category. But we're not pushing net zero now. Okay, so, oops, sorry.
Jean?
What did I do?
Okay, you're fine now.
Okay, so where was I? Crack build?
Yes.
Okay, it's echoing now.
Let's see. I think you might have your computer speakers, you might have flipped those on. So if you could just flip them off.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right, sorry. Okay, so you want to make sure that all your SIP panels are sealed, especially on the bottom, if they're going on a foundation or if they're going on a slab. Okay, multifamily buildings, we're not doing a lot of multifamilies, but along with the inspection in here, it just wants to make sure that you understand that multifamily buildings are going to have a lot of these, what we call dummy walls. I call them dummy walls, but you got these walls in here, and these things have to be caulked at the time of the framing. And then you're going to have a big space in here, so these need to be sealed. Again, depending on the kind of construction multifamily buildings are, I mean, we go into a whole different rating system for those. But again, most of this caulking is going to be done when it's still framed, before the sheet rockers come in, before anybody else comes in. Okay, now doors. We talk about doors. These are attic doors, garage doors, basement doors. Depending if it's coming in from an unconditioned space into a conditioned area, then you definitely want to weather strip that door. You either want to insulate it. In some areas, if you're looking at zone 3, 4, and 5, sometimes you have to weather strip even the hot water heater doors, because if they're bringing in fresh air from outside for that combustion air for the furnace or for the hot water heater if they're natural gas, then you need to make sure that those doors on those hot water heaters doors are a solid core door and they're weather stripped, and all the area around that is insulated also, because that area is going to be treated as an unconditioned area inside the house. So you want to make sure that those doors are sealed and conditioned. This is just a sample of a door, let's say going into a garage. You want to make sure that you weather strip that door so it's a good airtight fit. You know, one of the tests that you can do with these doors is if you go outside and you leave the garage light on, if you can see daylight coming in around that door frame, then yeah, you need to do some kind of weather stripping around those doors. If you can see daylight, you can feel air coming through there, put your hand against those doors on a windy day. If you can feel air, then you know definitely need to weather strip those. And there's a bunch of different weather stripping you can type. You know, I like the tubular and gasket. I like those. Those are the best ones. I think they're easier to adjust, easy to install. You got a lot of different foams out there. So these access panel and drop-in stairs, these are great things to work with. I mean, everyone is different. You find these, you know, if you're doing acquisition rehab, you find these in a lot of old structures. Probably something built like in the 50s in the ranch houses, 50s, 60s. You find some nowadays, but not that many. But when you do, you know, you need to make sure that you treat them well. They're very hard to insulate. Most of the time these drop down. They drop down into into a conditioned area. They'll drop down into maybe a hallway, into a bedroom. But the best way to deal with these is you want to build a box up and around there. So when you build them up, you can spray insulation all the way to the box, and then that stairwell sits inside the box, and then you're just going to cover that box with foam board. So that box is easy to get up and off of there as you open those things, and you're not having insulation drop down every time you open those things or drop the stairs down. And that box keeps the insulation back, and it's insulated to the same R value as the attic, only you're using a foam board. Very interesting to do. Same thing with hatch covers. On this picture it shows the hatch cover being insulated with a 6-inch fiberglass bat. I usually like to put foam board behind there. You can get, you know, if you got an R30 in the attic, R40, you can put four boards of foam board on there, get the same R value, weather strip the attic hatch. One of the things with the attic hatch is sometimes you have to weigh these down, or you have to put little locks on the side to keep the attic hatch in place, because the house does breathe, and it will lift that attic hatch up out of the house, out of the attic access, if it breathes too hard. The picture on the right just shows you where the weather stripping should be. Once you're putting that paneling down, that should be a foam gasket on there, so you're sealing that board and the sheetrock on top of that. Whole house fans, again, these fans, sometimes you see these, sometimes you don't. I've seen a lot of these in Colorado where you see them up in the attic and they'll suck up all the air out of the attics and stuff. Again, sometimes you'll see these in the kitchen instead of just an exhaust fan. They got these whole house fans that they're installing. Again, if you're installing one of these, it has to be equal to or insulated to equal to or greater than an R10. Again, we talked about the insulated box behind the drop lights, or the drop lights, the same thing with this. Again, these are different pictures. The one on the left is basically something you're going to find up in an attic nowadays if you're going to do acquisition rehab. All this did was just suck all the air from inside the house into the attic. You know, so all this foam around it shows it all nice and white. It would probably be all black and full of grease and everything else. The one on the right, this is an insulated fan. It's also got a cover, so when it's not in use, it's got a damper on it, so it's not in use. It's going to seal that off, and there's no air coming back in through the house in that. Again, this is the front. It's exhausting out the back, so it'll either go out to the front. What you need to remember with these whole house fans and any kind of exhaust fan is they have to be vented all the way to the exterior of the house. They can't be vented just into the attic or into a crawl space because it collects a lot of moisture and it collects a lot of grease. So these things have to be vented directly to the outside in order for them to work right. Again, that's just another penetration, but again, you know, And that's pretty much it on this one. You know, there's some things, like I say, if you don't do some of this stuff in the very beginning, like your caulking, your sealing, any kind of penetrations, when it's going to show is when you're doing your blower door test. The blower door test, when you come in with your blower door, it's going to come in, it's going to give you a reading, and if you already got your sheetrock up and your insulation is up, there's no way of going back to do any kind of caulking or any kind of air sealing. So some of those penetrations, like we talked about, you know, especially all the plumbing penetrations underneath the house, those are the biggies, you know. And it gives you the list on the rating list. It gives you the list in the order that you find these things that's going to make a big difference. Again, electrical, these are one of the biggest things that you'll see. Again, the plumbing, these plumbings, you really need to look at this, because sometimes there's different air barriers that you can use. Sometimes you have to use foam board, geocell sprays. There's just, you just never know how you're going to deal with the plumbing. So again, look at it. Okay, so then on the bottom of your list, when you get to the bottom of your list down there, it's going to tell you, it's going to ask who the rater's name is, and then it's going to talk about the pre-drywall inspection. So just with your pre-drywall inspection right here, this just goes to show that all your air leakage has been done, your rater has been in there, he's looked at your framing, he's looked at your insulation. By this time, he should have already inspected all your floor insulation, your slab insulation. He's checking to make sure that your framing is caulked. All the penetrations going out, maybe through the crawl space, the attic, all that is done. So by the time he comes in, all this is done. Now he's just doing a pre-drywall inspection. So at this particular time, there's different ways you can do this. Sometimes you can do a blower door test at this particular time. Like in our area, South Texas, they insulate the rafters, so the attic is a conditioned space. So when they're doing their blower door, they're taking their attic into consideration, and that attic is a conditioned area, so the whole house is conditioned. So they can do a blower door at that time and determine the ratio or the air leakage, and then from there they can either just continue doing more air leakage, or they can start sheetrocking and call it good. But again, that'll depend on your rater, type of unit that you're building, and when your inspections are coming in. So again, you know, then you're going to have a final inspection, and then you're going to have your building inspection. So again, your rater, this is probably the third time or the fourth time that your rater comes out to your unit and looks at your unit. Remember, he was out there to do the pre-pouring of the slab, to check your foam insulation at that time. Then he's out there checking the air leakage, and then the insulation, and then all your caulking, weather strip, all that good stuff. So by now he's been out there 4 times. Okay, this was a short one. It wasn't a lot to cover, you know, but like I say, if you don't do your homework and if you don't do your air leakage work when all this is available to you or the framing is open to you, you're going to pay later when it comes to the blower door test, because there's no way of getting back in there. And that's where you're going to really rate, is if your blower door test is good, then your units are going to rate low, and you're going to be able to reach that Energy Star 3.0 or better. And this is where you do it, is in your air leakage. So I think that's it for me, Terry. So if there's questions.
We do have a few questions that have come in via the Q&A box. And before we get started with the questions that have come in via the Q&A box, we are going to open up the phone line so that folks can ask questions verbally of Gene. But before we do that, you know, we will always want to ask everyone to mute your lines locally. So we'll kind of go through that after we get done with these few questions that I'm going to feed to Gene now. And so, Gene, the first question is with regard to rehabbing of homes. Would you advise ripping out all of the old installation, or is it permissible to add in new installation on top of old installation?
No, it's permissible to add new insulation on top of the old insulation. The only way you wouldn't want to do that is if you got some kind of insulation like perlite or asbestos in the attic or something like that. Then that's a different story. But if you just got rock wool, fiberglass, cellulose, you can add more insulation. But again, if you're trying to reach some kind of energy rating system on there, then you're going to have to get in there in that attic and probably do some air leakage work before you spread your additional insulation. Or you could spray a cellulose insulation on top of that. And cellulose, it's a lot better. It doesn't breathe as much as fiberglass, so a lot of the sealing could be done that way too.
All right, great. The next question is, you mentioned all of the fans need to be vented all the way to the exterior. Is this the same for bathroom fans as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Nowadays they got these nice fans, Energy Star fans. You can't even hear them running, but they have a damper in the back, so when the fan's not in use, this damper closes. So you're not getting a downdraft or any kind of air or any kind of heat heat loss through that fan anymore like in the old days. In the old days, that fan was just open, and if you vented it all the way to the outside, it was a hole that big to the outside all the time. Nowadays, they got these real nice exhaust fans. They're Energy Star. They're silent. The only reason you know they're on is because there's a little green light on there that comes on when the fan's on. If the fan's not on, it's a little red light. But you can't even hear them, but they got a damper in the back. They're great stuff. Nice stuff nowadays.
Okay, one of the last two questions, and these are very similar. Are there whole house fans that are Energy Star rated already that you can just purchase?
I'm pretty sure there is. I was looking at some just before this, but yeah, there's some that are rated already.
All right, and the other question that's very similar, Jean, and it's the last question that came in via Q&A. Are there Energy Star qualified ductless air conditioners or mini splits?
Yeah, there are. They're electric though. But I'm pretty sure there is. You can get those, I think there's a company in Japan that makes a real small one. My wife was just looking at those the other day because she wants to put them in medical clinics. I think that's what you're talking about. It's individual room heating and cooling units.
It's not clear from the question, but...
Well, I think that's what it is. It's an individual heating and cooling unit. And the way the ones I looked at is they work by temperature. If somebody walks into the room, the temperature from the body sets off the thermostat, and the thing starts on. And then once the person leaves the room, the temperature will drop just by the body leaving, and it drops, and the thing stops working. So it's very interesting. But we're looking at them putting them into clinics. I don't know. Hopefully that's what you're talking about.
Okay. Those are all the questions that have come in via the Q&A. I am actually going to go ahead and unmute all of the lines, but I would ask everyone again to, if you're not planning to ask any questions verbally of Jean, to go ahead and mute your lines locally so that we don't get any of the feedback and the noise, and we can kind of control it where everyone can hear the questions and the answers being shared. And then also like to advise people to be on the lookout for an email following the webinar. It contains your certificate of participation as well as a link to the evaluation for the webinar. So we would ask that folks visit the evaluation. And all right, so since there are no additional questions, or having not received additional questions, I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar, and again remind you to please be on the lookout for that email which contains the certificate of participation as well as the evaluation for today's webinar. Here's Jean's contact information on the screen. If you have any questions that you'd like to follow up with him after the webinar, please take down Jean's contact information. Also, the PowerPoint as well as the handouts and the recording will be available on HAC's website here shortly. And so, Jean, do you have any final words today?
No, just good luck if you're on your building.
All right. With that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and wish you a very good rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.